Nice deep breath and let our eyes fall closed. Sink into our seats a bit. Take another nice deep breath. Give yourself just a moment or two of peace and breathing before we have our meditation. For the fresh morning air and another day of light and love. For friends and family who embrace us in laughter and care. For the food that brings us delight and the animals who bring us joy and the stories that make us wonder and the pictures that make us happy and the puzzles that we can only solve together. For the songs that are best sung by many and the work that takes all of us and the play that invites each of us and the night that awaits us and the peaceful darkness of dreams and rest. For these and for all the gifts of life, we say to earth, to air, to fire, to water, to spirit, to one another and the ancestors. Thank you. And amen. We have a reading this morning in place of the reflection. This was written by John Lewis near the end of his life when he knew he was going to die pretty soon. He wrote it to be published posthumously, and it was printed in the New York Times. This is an excerpt of the larger column. And he wrote this to the younger people, in particular the young leaders of the Black Lives Matter for Racial Justice movement, which was really at its height right around when he passed away. So that's his audience. While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people motivated simply by human compassion laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity. That is why I had to visit Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, though I was admitted to the hospital the following day. I just had to see and feel it for myself that after many years of silent witness, the truth is still marching on. Like so many young people today, I was searching for a way out, or some might say a way in. And then I heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on an old radio. He was talking about the philosophy and discipline of nonviolence. He said, we are all complicit when we tolerate injustice. He said, it is not enough to say it will get better by and by. He said, each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state, it is an act. And each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. You must also study and learn the lessons of history because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, and that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe, because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence is the most excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and more. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. There ends our reading this morning. In his 1999 book, Walking with the Wind, a memoir of a movement, the late Congressman John Lewis recalls a harrowing childhood experience. He's outside playing with a bunch of other kids when a storm rolls in. They go into his Aunt Neela's house to wait out the storm, but the storm quickly becomes much more powerful than they expected. Torrential rain falls down, the sky is completely black, and the wind is so strong that it shakes the whole house. All the kids are very frightened. Aunt Neela, the only adult present, is as well. And then the wind begins to pick up a corner of the house. They see the floor lifting a bit and realize that the house might get blown away with them in it. Aunt Eva, thinking quickly, has the kids hold hands and walk as a unit to the corner of the house that is lifting in the wind. Their weight holds that part of the floor down, but then another part of the floor starts to lift up. The kids then move as a group, holding hands to that corner to keep that part of the floor down as well. And this is how they waited out the storm, by using their weight to hold the house down, holding hands, moving with the wind, keeping things stable as a wild storm rushes around them. In Lewis's own words, and eventually the storm would settle and the house would still stand, but we knew another storm would come and we would have to do it all over again. And we did, and we still do, all of us, you and I. Lewis would indeed have to do it all again and again and again and again. Born in 1940 and dying in 2020, Lewis led or influenced virtually every aspect of America's racial justice movement during his lifetime. At 17, he met Rosa Parks. At 18, he met Dr. King. He had been following the Montgomery bus boycott and admired its nonviolent approach. He quickly joined the larger movement, eventually becoming one of the lead organizers of the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where Dr. King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Less remembered is Lewis's own speech, which is urgent, uncompromising, and impassioned. He begins with a concern for those who can't be at the march because they have to work for, as he says, starvation wages or no wages. He mentioned sharecroppers in particular, which makes sense because the march was primarily about jobs and economic freedom. He also lifts up students and other activists currently in jail for nonviolent protests. He moves on to express support for the Civil Rights Bill then before Congress, but he does so with misgivings because it doesn't go far enough. And he spells some of that out in clear and compelling ways. The center of his address is a demand for freedom now, not later, and a refusal to be patient. If King inspired people with the dream of the world that our children would live in tomorrow, Lewis inspired people with a demand for what should be today. In other words, in that context, Lewis was less moderate. Any movement needs both approaches, though, the dream and the urgency, the vision and the immediacy, the direction and the acceleration. When proponents of the two approaches work well, the movement goes well. When proponents infight over strategy, usually for resources, the movement weakens. Lewis, especially when he was younger, pushed for more and faster, but always within the larger movement, which meant that his efforts impacted and empowered more and more people and contributed to more and more change. It also assured that he would grow, that he would learn by being challenged, coached, taught, and consoled by people committed not only to the same cause, but to him as a person, a friend, someone they loved. This intergenerational circle of justice and peace and accountability is needed for the activist who wants to be in a movement over the long haul. It becomes the foundation of one's activism, replacing the self, replacing pride, replacing inflexibility and overcertainty, replacing them with love and community. He concludes his remarks by saying that they will march with the spirit of love and the spirit of dignity, and that by doing so, quote, we shall splinter the segregated South into 1,000 pieces and put them together in the image of God and democracy, end quote. You should watch it tomorrow sometime. It's on YouTube. It's 7.5 minutes, and you'll even see Bayard Rustin standing behind him as he speaks. It's really quite the scene. And 2 years later, he would be among the hundreds to march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma in 1965. That event would come to be known as Bloody Sunday, at least America's Bloody Sunday, as the nonviolent protesters were beaten and attacked by troops. Lewis suffered a skull fracture in the attack, and while few remember his March on Washington speech, many would remember this attack and how it only propelled his nonviolent activism and the entire movement forward. This would become the event he would often be firstly remembered for, at least until he was elected to Congress in 1986, where he would serve for 18 terms until he died in 2020. A complete account of his life, career, and activism is the stuff of books and will be for a long time. Suffice to say that few had the good and noble effect on America that he did, and his gifts continue to form our country. One of which is a brief quote that is printed on the front of your order of service this morning. That quote is, "Get in good trouble, necessary trouble, and help redeem the soul of America." You can find that everywhere, as it reflects the creative nonviolence and peaceful civil disobedience that has long proven effective in social transformation. It leaves open what good necessary trouble is. It might be posing a particular challenge. It might be disobedience before an unjust law. It might be defending the oppressed. It might be discomforting a system of persecution. It might involve learning, listening, growing, and acting, but it always involves acting in a way that disrupts what ought not to be. For example, one of Lewis's early goals upon his election to Congress was to develop a national museum to celebrate and honor African-American culture, its power, resilience, diversity, gifts, and beauty. And it also is a history that includes devastating racism and horrible abuses committed over generations. And it is the kind of history that many don't want to be taught or reflected anywhere in society. Public schools all over the country are struggling right now with concerted efforts to teach a kind of American history that is void of America's racism, the realities of slavery, and the ongoing legacies of Jim Crow. This preferred ignorance is not new, though, and it has always been the choice of plenty who wish to ignore histories that lead to discomfort or shame. What's new today, though, is how organized the proponents of this unhistory are, and how focused they are on local school boards, including perhaps yours. As Lewis would say, the best response is to vote, to get active, to get informed, and to vote, perhaps to run. He was a city council member before he was a Congress member. Cause that good and necessary trouble to trouble those trying to demand that history be intentionally mistaught. And Lewis himself, with this goal of creating that museum, faced much opposition for a long time, financial, cultural, a general question of whether or not it was appropriate or needed. He stayed at it though, building a larger and larger coalition, and as times changed, the idea caught on. And 17 years after he was elected, the bill creating the museum was passed in 2003, and the museum itself opened in 2016 as the National Museum of African American History and Culture. He never gave up. Another sentiment often attributed to him, working on this goal for years and years to see it through, not as one, but as one by then in a much larger movement. Alone, he could have never created that museum, but by joining with others, building a coalition, being focused and flexible, he played a major role in bringing the museum to fruition. And in helping to create that museum, he brings to life the second part of that quotation, the part that is often less noticed. Everyone remembers the get in good, necessary trouble part. Sometimes that's the only part you see when you see the quotation, get in good, necessary trouble, Representative John Lewis. And then the rest is forgotten. But his trouble has a purpose. It's to redeem the soul of America. It's not to get in trouble for the sake and stature of being a troublemaker. That can be an attractive image, but that's not the point of the trouble he's talking about. His trouble is in the interest of redemption, which makes special demands of us if we are to take his lesson and legacy seriously. One demand is to believe that redemption is possible, to look at the story of America and see in it people and places and points in which we collectively moved closer to living out our greatest shared values. It's to temper the despair of all there is to do to redeem our country with the optimism found in knowing that good and great things have always been part of this country's story. It is to know that redemption is possible because other people and groups have made it real. And now it is our turn to make it real as well. Redemption and hope are linked in this dynamic that while our history is a difficult one, so too is it a hopeful one. If it is honestly taught as people coming together in each generation in diverse ways to create a greater commitment to the common good. To redeem the soul of America, we have to believe that redemption is possible. Lewis believed that even after having his skull fractured in a nonviolent protest, he still found cause for hope and the strength to move toward redemption, and so too must we all. And the other demand is that redemption can only come from love, not violence, not attacks, not cynicism, not vengeance. Only love redeems. In our faith's history, this was a claim that we originally made about the redemption offered by God. While other faiths taught that God's redemption was for very few and offered alongside divine wrath, the sort that sought to descend one's soul into perdition forever, our forebears claimed instead that redemption was an act of divine love. They claimed that God wasn't perpetually aggrieved by us, wasn't always angry at us, wasn't just itching to punish us, had not set up a bunch of rules just so that we'd break them and be cast away. They claimed that God was fundamentally of love and loved each of us without limit and with no exception. And they knew that, yeah, we're broken. We're always at least a little broken as people and a country. Many of these forebearers were universalist abolitionists preaching to a country practicing slavery. They knew we were broken, but they also knew that this doesn't mean that we're not loved and not worthy and not capable of being better and happier if we live in the fullness of that love, if we let ourselves be redeemed by it, if we march with that love as Lewis lived and preached, if we embrace it, pray to it, live as though it's real until it is, we will experience redemption as one and as many. We will grow together in the spirit, in a sense of the common good, into beings that increasingly glimpse the beloved community that is a land of respect and sustenance and compassion. But just as the heaven of our forebears imagined could not be created by an always irate, hyper-judgmental God, neither can our redeemed America be created through unchecked anger, vengeance, and violence. That all just creates more of the same within, among, and beyond. If the land we want is loving, love is the only path to take. And we can only redeem what we love. And so if we are to redeem the soul of America in Lewis's sense, which was his dream and his urging, we have to love the soul of America, even as we challenge and change so much about how the country works. And we have to cause the good necessary trouble to make our country live a life of integrity and equality and peace. And we have to do that out of love, which means that our trouble can't only be good and necessary, but must also be holy. We have to cause the good, necessary, and holy trouble of working toward redemption through love and with one another. It takes our trouble and our courage, our creativity and coalitions for sure, but if this is to be a work of our faith, it must be centered in that same love that has always guided us, Following it will build a better land. Our hearts will be stronger, our vision broader, our steps quickened, our voices clearer, our courage resolute. We will be good, necessary, and holy troublemakers, working toward a redemption known in the past and known in our days, and to be known among our young who will one day fix what we're missing. And until then, like John Lewis as a child, with that love, we can hold hands and hold things down, even during the great storms of life. We can link with one another to withstand all that would separate us. We can watch the clouds roll in and feel the winds picking up and know that if we stay together, we'll see the sun again and we'll touch dirt, and the storm will become a fresh and easy rain that brings life to field and flower. May it be so, and amen. Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of love and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held